Hey guys, what is up? Public here back with a video, and unfortunately after a couple rounds of nerfs, they've changed Dracthyr quite a bit in terms of what's offered for the racials for this race. So in this video we're going to kind of go over what's changed, what's different, and to kind of help answer the question, should you play Dracthyr if you're interested? Let's dive in. Alright, so unfortunately after either all the people posting, all the feedback and that kind of thing, they've nerfed a couple things with playing Dracthyr as a priest coming up in the upcoming 11.05 anniversary patch. So I kind of had to remake this video because a lot of the stuff that I talked about in the previous one is just no longer the case. So if we kind of pop open the spellbook, they have changed up quite a bit here. So one of the biggest things, they removed a couple things. So first off, you only have one kind of AoE crowd control. You only have Wing Buffet now, which is the one that knocks enemies in front of you. So you used to have two of these, right? So you had Wing Buffet and Tail Sweep or Tail Swope or something. So yeah, we only have the one that knocks enemies in front of you. So if we go over here, right, like just does the frontal knock. You no longer have the one that is AoE around your character. That is specific to evokers only. So that's a big change. Now you still, of course, have most of the other passives have remained the same. So you still get the 1 point of mastery, which for Shadow Priest is 0.5%. We talked about kind of the strength of that racial, like on paper, theoretically. It's like solid middle of the pack, but it's nothing exceptional for us. There are other ones that are generally better from like a pure damage perspective. So not the best, but by no means is it the worst. It's definitely kind of middle of the pack average. There's a couple other things, you know, obviously you can dragon ride in this form, and there's plenty of people that are like very interested in how this looks, or maybe they'll just choose to play in the kind of other form, which is Blood Elf for male, or I think Human for female. So yeah, there's some of that stuff is still intact. Unfortunately, they did severely nerf the kind of mobility of playing Dracthyr, which is one of the main reasons I made the video in the first place, was just to kind of highlight how strong this felt as a priest, which is just such a low mobility spec in the game. So if you didn't know, Dracthyr has the ability to glide. So what that means is when you double jump, you kind of get that little burst of movement speed forward. Now, this was nerfed quite significantly, so if you're not playing Evoker, this glide is actually significantly worse than it was before. You can go back and see my other video, and you're able to travel quite a lot further with this, and kind of more like a mini goblin jump off cooldown. So, you know, a lot of people were expecting some changes here, although this is a little bit heavy-handed. So for us, when it comes to playing a priest, this isn't that significant. So before, you were getting a pretty good burst over pressing Body and Soul or Angelic Feather, but now the movement speed from those, I guess I don't have those macroed, but the movement speed from those is pretty equivalent to what you're going to see otherwise if you're just able to glide. So you're not actually gaining much with the glide specifically on just straight up being able to move from point A to point B faster. Right now, if we're in our talent tree, right, so Body and Soul increases your target's movement speed by 40% for 3 seconds, and Angelic Feather is also 40%. So we already have quite a bit of that, and that's available more or less all the time. We can keep that up quite a lot. So we don't get a whole lot of having glide if it's not significantly better than that. And unfortunately, if you're just talking about going from point A to point B, it is still faster than just walking normally, so you are getting something out of it. When I was doing just kind of my tests walking around, it was about like 15 to 20% faster. So it's definitely something. You can definitely move faster, but by no means is it, as what I'd say, like that incredible to be playing this versus something else. I was strongly considering swapping to Dracthyr like just for that, because that's how strong that it was. But it's since been nerfed quite a bit, and not going to be nearly as strong as it was before. Alright, so when it comes to the racials on your priest, you still have a couple options, and I think by no means is, I think, Dracthyr going to be a case of, like, you should feel like you should have to play this if you want the extra mobility. I think from my perspective, from testing, the mobility is nice, but to me it's not that game-breaking, at least for priest. We have quite a bit of other things that I don't think it's, like, that quite impactful. It does give some other things which are interesting. The mastery racial could end up scaling better as we go on through the expansion, although we typically see things like the human racial end up outperforming most things as we add gear. I would expect that to be still the case. So I think for me specifically, when it comes to looking at a race for my priest, I'm going to pick utility over damage almost 9 times out of 10. And the reason for that is, if I simply just kind of argue to myself, if I can provide more utility for my group, especially from like a Mythic Plus perspective, I'm always going to lean towards that direction. So things like, you know, the big obvious one is Stone Form. Stoneform is just so strong in just a wide variety of content, just being able to purge effects that we wouldn't be able to otherwise, particularly if there's like nasty bleed effects in dungeons, poisons, that kind of thing. So I think for me, Dwarf will always kind of be a really solid choice if you're interested in utility. Of course, you also have Night Elf. I think Shadow Meld is prone to being very nice to be able to drop mechanics in Mythic Plus particularly. So I think if you're interested in playing Shadow in Mythic Plus specifically in 1105, I would still say that Night Elf or Dwarf are going to be your top picks from like a utility perspective. And I don't think that there's like a big reason to feel like you should swap to Dracthyr if you're just talking about a utility perspective. Obviously, these benefits are kind of small and minor. You should play whatever feels fun and looks fun for you. But that's just kind of where my headspace is at with the utility. Now, if we switch gears and end up talking about actual strength instead, I'll pull up the racial chart as well. There is, a bit more to consider here. And again, this kind of comes down to a little bit of personal preference, right? But I'll kind of show you where things stand up right now if you haven't already seen this. So there is quite a lot of disparity here, a little bit between the bottom and the kind of middle of the pack and upper pack. This is just showing it what it's going to look like for Season 1 if you haven't already seen this. So obviously Mechanomes are doing really well right now. If you're interested in kind of pushing your performance, Mechanome, Orc, and Mag'har Orc are all strong options. Draenei's also up there, Troll's up there, Humans pretty solid as well. So there's quite a bit up here that are kind of the top damage racials. So if you're not really interested in the utility value of things like Dwarf or Night Elf, that kind of thing, you're just talking about like pure, raid performance or whatever else it is, these are kind of the options that I would still consider. But again, a lot of these are kind of, hovering around this like 1% area. There's only a couple that are really pushing above that just because they do give other things in addition to that most always. So yeah, I mean, unfortunately, Dracthyr is not standing out here when it comes to throughput. And because now its utility is nerfed, I'm not quite sure how popular it ended up being. But I think, again, the utility before was quite strong, so not surprised in the end. So let me know what you think. Were you still thinking about playing Dracthyr in the next patch, or are you going to stick with another race going in for your priest? Excited to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. Catch you next time.